Good evening and welcome to Between the Lines. I'm John Matisonn. My guest tonight is Justice Albie Sachs, whom we interviewed last week, and we're going to have a second shot tonight. Welcome and thanks for being here. Albie, one of the interesting things in your book, We the People, Insights of an Activist Judge, which is your 10th book, is you have an essay from 1992, which I didn't know you had written or that were saying at that time, in which you wrote worryingly about experiences of what you'd seen in Africa. And you give the example of Jomo Kenyatta, the freedom fighter who became an autocrat and amassed a fortune, and that was in Kenya, and you referred to that in our earlier show. You ended this talk saying, the danger of an autocrat, may it never happen in South Africa, that if a once noble veteran of the struggle passes wind, the people declare what a victory, because the rich man's fart smells sweet. Now that was something quite unusual to say at that time, to think that things could go wrong. What were you thinking of, and how do you think about that now?
Okay, the phrase came from Ngugi wa Thiong'o. A rich man's fart smells sweet. He loved it so much he used it like 4 times in one book. And I was giving an inaugural lecture, honorary professor at the University of Cape Town, and the title was Perfectibility and Corruptibility, the tension that lies at the heart of every constitutional endeavor. We aim for something ideal, but we are aware that even the best of humans can be corrupted. And that was based on our experience in countries that had fought for their freedom, developed autocracies, authoritarian rule afterwards, and inside our own organization, where we'd seen people given power abuse the power. I remember so vividly a meeting we had where I was explaining why we need a Bill of Rights. I touched on it last week. And I said there are 3 reasons for a Bill of Rights. It makes us look good. The second reason I said is it's our strategic answer, Oliver Tambo's answer to group rights. And I said the third reason, and this is why my heart was going boom, 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 is we need it against ourselves. Constitutions are based on mistrust. And I was worried that the delegates from MK, the underground, diplomats as our Albie bourgeois, you might remember the word bourgeois, you know, soft, reactionary lawyers are like that. But instead of that, there was a look of delight in their eyes, because they'd known the potential weaknesses in our own people. And that's why you have a constitution. It's for good weather and for bad weather. And in drafting our constitution, we bore that in mind, that we are creating institutions for the future against ourselves.
And when you look back at it now, you're obviously pleased that we've got it.
You know, Joe Slover used to say, I'm not going to say I told you so. That was his way of saying I told you so. In a sense, I'm not pleased that a lot of things are going badly wrong that put the Constitution to the test in the way that they do. But I'm pleased we had the foresight and the principled vision to put in place elections, free and fair. That was number 1. They used to say, 1 man, 1 vote once. Blacks can never rule. Majority rule is not for Africa. We've proved in South Africa majority rule is for Africa. It's functioned well in this country, and our elections are free and fair, not just once. More people voted, a higher percentage in our local government elections than for the President of the United States. Then we've got a very lively, free, open press. It's under pressure. When it's under pressure, you'll know because the press will tell you within seconds, and correctly so. And then we've got institutions. It says in the Constitution, for the protection of democracy, the Auditor General, we take that person for granted. Fantastic. You have to account for all appropriations. It doesn't apply all over the world like that. Then we've got the Public Protector. Truly, Madonsela, I don't have to say anything more. The Public Protector protected the public in the way that was required. Then we've got the Human Rights Commission. We've got other commissions as well. An independent broadcasting authority that had a big role at one stage, as you wrote so deeply about it. It was so moving reading in your book about the way it was working to establish new norms, and hopefully we can recover that sense of morale and elan in relation to broadcasting for the public, not for this group or that group or this individual or that individual. And then we've got the judiciary. And when I watched streamed on my computer, the decision in the Nkandla case, first of all, the court looked so beautiful. And we built that court right in the heart of the old prison, where Gandhi and Mandela had been locked up. We South Africans were the only ones who could make that terrible boast. And the judges were so thoughtful and composed and overwhelmingly black, but white, men, women, the nation. It's a level of dialogue and discussion about fundamental values, not screaming and shouting, very impressive. And then that powerful statement by Chief Justice Mogoeng, and my heart just filled with pride, because that was why we established these institutions, and they are working.
I want to raise one caveat, I suppose, and it's not the fault of the Constitution, but the Constitution, I mean, a sort of primary purpose of a Constitution is that people have their representatives who can help them when they need help. And we went for the proportional representation system, but the Constitution also required that this be looked at after democracy is established. And it was looked at, but President Mbeki ruled it out and it didn't change. Would you disagree if I say that that is a problem? Because we have, whether it's fees must fall or social service delivery strikes, protests, you never see a member of parliament or a member of a provincial council or even a town councillor there. And if we had a member of parliament for Rondebosch or for Grahamstown or for Auckland Park or Braamfontein in Johannesburg, where the universities are, or Loftus Versfeld in Pretoria, those MPs would be out there and calling the minister and fighting and saying, we've got to fix this. And instead, our representatives in the legislatures are not active. Is that not a problem?
It's a problem that representatives are not more active. That is a problem. It's not the fault of the system. First of all, the Constitution says proportional representation is the main principle that must be, and it's the most democratic one.
Yes.
In the United States now, Hillary Clinton gets 2 million more votes than Trump.
And loses the election.
Loses the elections. That wouldn't happen under a PR. But it says mainly, and the understanding was when we drafted it, we wanted the Constitutional Assembly to be as inclusive as possible. We didn't want group areas representation, whites representing whites, Indians, and so on, which we would have had. We didn't want to fight over the boundaries. But the idea was the second elections would be a mixed system, PR and constituencies. And that's the way we have it for municipalities.
Exactly.
And that could be done nationally. And Van Zyl-Slabbert had a commission, it was a cross-party, and they've come up with a solution for that. And it doesn't require amending the Constitution.
Right.
As long as the ultimate tally corresponds to the proportion of votes you get, that's what the Constitution requires.
We have to take a break. We'll be right back with Judge Sachs. And we're back with Judge Albie Sachs. Albie, just to finish on what we were discussing, the Slabbert Commission proposed a sort of combination of proportional representation and direct voting. Would that have passed muster? Well, I don't want to commit you to something, but was that in line with what the Constitution was recommending for the second and subsequent?
Yes, we had, in the ANC, we had a workshop in advance. We weren't committed to one thing or the other. We felt that PR was most important for the Constitutional Assembly. Everybody must be there. We didn't want people to... And that went against the ANC. The ANC would have won 60% of the votes. With a constituency-based, we would have got 80% of the seats. It would have been a disaster. People say, it's not our Constitution. We wanted it to be the national Constitution. Our understanding politically was the second elections would be a mixed system, like the German one.
Yes.
And so Slabbert's come up with a third kind of a system. And I think it definitely requires looking into. And it might be, who knows how politics are going to go in this country, PR certainly lends itself to coalition government, for better or for worse, and maybe there can be a new consensus on an electoral system that does allow you to have your local MP.
Yeah. We want to move on. I want to ask you, maybe this is another sensitive subject for you, but about the, I think you were very committed to the International Criminal Court. Do you speak about how you feel about South Africa withdrawing from it?
You know, one of the most poignant aspects of it is Jackie Celebi was probably the key negotiator at Rome, behind the scenes, on behalf of South Africa, in getting consensus.
For the ICC?
For the ICC, to get it established. So South Africa was one of the creators of it, using all the negotiating skills. And it's certainly a very sad day when some treaty we've signed on to, we're now withdrawing from. There are serious weaknesses. The one argument doesn't hold water, really, that it's targeting Africa. The African countries were the main supporters of it, and they were the ones who brought the cases, and others the Security Council.
On behalf of Africans who'd been badly treated?
Inside their own countries.
Right.
They felt they didn't have the capacity
to deal with the
cases. So they asked but the other argument is that it doesn't apply universally. The United States is not a member, China's not a member, other big powers are not members, and so there's something lacking in that true sense of internationalism that is required.
And of course the United States won't join it because they're not prepared to risk having someone like George W. Bush called based on what he did in Iraq.
Exactly.
For example. Yeah.
For example. So it denudes it of a true universality, internationalism. But the argument is get inside. Transform it. If there are problems in relation to Africa, deal with it from inside.
Yes.
Well, that debate is continuing. Some of the issues are before the courts, so I won't say anything more.
Right. I do want to ask you about one other thing, which I think you referred to in your book in a different context, and that is when the Rhodes Must Fall idea came up. There were some people who were arguing, well, instead of just removing Rhodes, why don't... Because I know you had a great influence on the Constitutional Court's art collection and how it was structured, and talk about the architecture. Did you have thoughts about how that could have been done differently?
I did, and it's in the book.
Yes.
Where I was saying that you can remove the statue, but the memory remains. It'll be far more powerful, get the last laugh on Rhodes, if you surround it with other statues, with a contemporary vision and engaging with and contradicting what he stood for. But it was too late. By then the passions were so great.
Hard. Yes.
My intervention in City Press came out too late. But why did we build the court in the heart of the prison? People said, knock down the prison. It's a terrible side of pain. Right. We said, we don't remove our history, we confront our history, engage with it.
I also remember vividly when Nelson Mandela went to see Betsy Verwoerd at Oranje, the widow of Hendrik Verwoerd, the father of apartheid, or one of the architects of apartheid. And he looked at the statue of Verwoerd, and he was very courteous, as he always was. But he did have a twinkle in his eye when he said, I didn't realize it was so small. You wanted to say something about Mandela's role. Now we're talking about him in the Constitution.
His role was very strong as the strategist,
yes.
as the symbol, as the articulator, the calm person. And even when he lost it, and he pointed to de Klerk, this man is not to be trusted, he knew what he was doing.
It was strategic, wasn't it?
It was honest.
Yes.
It was spontaneous.
But deliberate.
But he really went for it. And there was jubilation in the townships.
Yes.
But by and large, it was calm, steady. That was his, giving everybody an opportunity to participate, watching over the process. But one issue he felt strongly about himself, and that was votes for young people, 16, 17-year-olds. He was adamant. And we looked at the Constitutional Committee, we said no. He was adamant. We insisted. Somebody advising him said there are 5 countries in the world that allow 14, 15 years old to vote. We said, who are they? It was North Korea, Yemen, I forget where else. And I remember the very last meeting now, the brave Constitutional Committee sends Advocate Albie Sachs to confront him because he's adamant. And in the end, he said, well, I have to sign off now as president. History will show I'm right. But 10 years later, he gave that as an example of a president can be wrong. When he was trying to nudge Thabo Mbeki to shift away from his ludicrous position on HIV/AIDS, he told that story against himself.
That a president can be wrong.
A president can be wrong and acknowledge that he's wrong. And I mention that to say the Constitution wasn't his thing. He didn't get into a corner with the clerk and a few business people and say, okay, we're going to do this. He actually played a very small role in the actual drafting and technical side. And in the one area where he did intervene personally, we rejected. We rejected his positions. That was the point that I felt.
We have to take our last break. We're back for the last segment in a moment. And we're back with Judge Albie Sachs. Albie, how do you feel the judiciary in South Africa is holding up today?
You know, we have a huge international reputation, which I'm very, very proud of. We are the most, Constitutional Court is the most cited court in the world, in the English-speaking world, after Canada.
Really?
The United States comes about seventh.
Wow.
More than the House of Lords
ahead of the
in
UK?
England. Ahead of the UK, well ahead of the UK.
Wow.
And it's because we've been engaging with tough issues and a lot of thought's gone into it. And we've been very conscious on our role. And one of the first things we appreciated was we have to look at the Constitution as a living document in the context of South African history, of our pain, of what the people are demanding, what they want, what they hope and expect. And that Constitution for Transformation has been central to our vision. And at first it was just the Constitutional Court and a couple of progressive judges in the other courts. Now decisions are coming out in the High Court in Gauteng, Eastern Cape, Cape Town. You see it, black judge, white judge, female judge, male judge. I feel so proud. I feel so proud. Not all our institutions in South Africa are working equally well, and the magistrates vary. We've got some wonderful, wonderful magistrates, but often the quality is not as good as it should be.
And also the resources in some of the lower courts
The resources are lacking. The preparation of evidence is below what it ought to be, but there's an awareness of it. There's an awareness of it. And certainly from the middle to the top levels, the quality is exceptionally high. And the government can't complain. I mean, Chief Justice Mogoeng gave that ringing judgment. Journalists who were there said they wanted to stand up and cheer afterwards. And I'm watching in my room on my screen. And I also wanted to cheer. And it wasn't interfering with government. It was getting government to do its job. Look at Parliament now, compared to before. Before, Parliament wasn't seen by the public as a body that was investigating and holding the executive to account. Now, they're challenging. That judgment has revitalized Parliament. It hasn't interfered with Parliament. It hasn't crossed the line of separation of powers. It's ensured that the other power is functioning in the way that the Constitution envisaged.
Because there has been this argument by some politicians that the court is trying to usurp the authority of Parliament or of the state.
You know, if the president thinks, that I make a mistake, I appointed Mogoeng thinking he's going to be a patsy, he's going to be fine, and look what he does, he gives this ringing, passionate judgment. It's misconceiving. This is an institution, it's not individuals working together as a team. And I got stopped, I'm rushing for my plane in the airport, Cape Town, and a big, burly, late middle-aged African man grabs me, he says, thank you. Thank you, thank you. I said, it wasn't me, I've been off the court for 7. He didn't even say why, he just said thank you. And I understood, and I just sensed he was reflecting the position of millions and millions of South Africans, the great majority, that the Constitution is working, the court is doing its job. It's not interfering with government, it's actually telling government if you're straying from what the Constitution requires, we're not making decisions for you. We're simply insisting you follow correct procedures, you do things correctly. Don't appoint crooks to be head of investigating crookery. That strengthens government. It strengthens the rule of law. It's not an invasion, as one example.
And in our system, the Constitution is sovereign, not the President or the legislature.
Absolutely. Another case, and it's not restricted to one president. We struck down a very important proclamation by Nelson Mandela on the first local government elections. We said, Parliament asked you to pass that law. Parliament can't do that. Parliament has to pass the laws itself. And Mandela went onto TV and he said, I fully accept the decision of the court.
And that was a key moment for us.
Absolutely. We became a constitutional democracy. The other case I wanted to mention, Thabo Mbeki, he mightn't have been happy with our decision on nevirapine, antiretrovirals for women about to give birth living with HIV, but he accepted it.
He did accept it.
And our country is better for it. And we rolled out ARV since then. So the intervention of the court strengthened government. It didn't weaken government. It didn't transgress on their territory. It called them back to what the Constitution expects.
What I thought was very interesting about that judgment, because when the first discussions came about having in the Constitution socio-economic rights, for many people there was a legitimate concern. If you tell the courts that they've got to grant all sorts of rights, it'll become uneconomic. And what was interesting is about the two health cases that I remember. The first was on a particular individual who, as I recall, wanted a dialysis machine, and the court ruled that that was too expensive, it could not be afforded. And then when the AIDS question came up, they took the other side and said, no, it must be afforded. And so they looked at all the issues and could make rational decisions that won't bankrupt the country, but will advance it.
Yes, that first case, Mr. Subramani.
Yes.
You know, we knew his life depended on us,
Yes.
and yet he had ischemic heart disease. He wasn't a good candidate for renal transplants, and the policy of the authorities, medical authorities, was to give preference to those who could, and we said we can't.
That's a legitimate decision of the.
But restricting the provision of nevirapine for 2 years while you're doing logistical experimentation, and babies are being born with the virus, we could have saved thousands of them from that. That was violating the Constitution very, very clearly.
We're going to run out of time in a moment, but I did want to finally ask you about your meeting with F.W. de Klerk. And since we started these interviews talking about your father, and you had this interesting encounter with him, we've only got about just less than 2 minutes.
It was earlier this year, and de Klerk has been very offhand towards me, very cold. I believe he fought like hell against me being put on the court.
I remember that.
Somebody told me that from Cabinet. In any event, I'm invited to speak at the F.W. de Klerk Foundation on multiculturalism. And I tell a story, amongst others, about growing up. My dad is General Secretary of the Garment Workers Union. Many of them Afrikaans-speaking women, Anna Skeepers, Johanna Cornelius, Esther Cornelius. They were big and full of fun and bright.
I remember them.
And Ace Krieger having a big influence on me.
Yes.
And Gregor Boonzaier, the first artist I knew. So Afrikaans for me wasn't something hostile. And that's part of how we've got to look at multiculturalism today. Something like that. In any event, his wife was so lovely to me when I arrived. And he was correct, no? Correct. I'm about to leave, and he's blocking my way. And he speaks to me in Afrikaans. And he says his father was a school principal. He said a very good one. And the National Party withdrew him from school to put him into the trade union area to try and undermine the Garment Workers Union.
And Solly Sachs.
Led by your father, Solly Sachs. My father, Jan de Klerk, in fact, passed many labor laws at the time, restricting the work that Solly Sachs was doing, which he said, de Klerk have repealed. He shook my hand and he walked away. And I was very amused. I thought, only in South Africa.
But I think, yes, do you think he warmed to you partly because you spoke about your support for Afrikaans as a language?
Partly that, but partly he saw the ironies of our history.
As you did.
And it's nice. It's nice.
Yes.
You know, somebody once said, I was on a platform with Rolf Meyer, and this was in Colombia, where we were helping their peace process there, and he said, how does somebody like Albie feel? You know, you were Minister of Police at the time he was blown up, or security. And then he turned to me and I said, you know, I feel even better today that somebody from that background is part of the democratic project. It's even better. It's not worse. I don't feel a lingering regret. On the contrary, I feel a sense of joy that now we're on the same page.
And that's a good note to end it. The book is We the People, Insights of an Activist Judge. Thanks so much. It's been a real pleasure. That's our show. Thanks for watching. Good night and happy reading.